Hello and welcome to another episode here on my channel. My name is Chaos and today we have to talk about item shops in online games, or in this particular case, the item shop in New World. You know, the MMO by Amazon. And last week, if you've missed it, there was an update in the New World Alpha, and that alpha is under NDA, so normally people are not allowed to talk about it. But what was updated was so problematic that people broke the NDA and told everyone about it, and they started to implement the item shop into New World. And what they saw there was not pretty. Yeah, there were your usual cosmetics here and there, skins and things for your housing and whatnot, like just some neat little cute looking things, nothing too big, you might imagine. But then people also found XP boost, farming boost, learning boosts, like for all the things you need in a game where leveling and learning by doing is a big no-no. And it got so bad and the shitstorm became so big that now Rich Lawrence, the studio director, had to put out an official message on the New World Twitter account. And we have to read through this, because the biggest problem the gaming industry always has, and this is not just New World, this goes basically for every studio, is there's the game developer component who just develops the game for fun, right? But then there's also the business component who wants to make as much money from the game as possible. And those two areas collide more and more nowadays, where the business component is sometimes even interfering with the gameplay to make more money out of it. And there is, of course, another issue with wording. The gaming industry has learned that they are getting away with a lot of things if they are just wording it right, so that they can later on say, hey, we never lied to you, right? You just had to read this more carefully to understand what we meant with it. It's a little bit like the small or fine print in a contract, and when then the company's like, yeah, well, if you wouldn't read this more correctly, then you wouldn't have signed this. And that's what game developers are trying to do nowadays, and I find that very questionable at best, right? And I actually find it dishonest that you have to use those kind of tricks to basically trick your player base into believing you that you would never do something which you technically have never said. So let's read the statement. So, shall we? Some questions have come up recently from our alpha patch notes discussing an in-game storefront. Our plan in having a store is to create an outlet for players who find enough value in the store items that they are happy to purchase them, which is pretty normal, and that's fine. Our plan is not, and never will be, to create a feeling that the store items are necessary to enjoy the game. All players will be able to play the full game experience with we ship without having to make store purchases. All store items at launch will be exclusively cosmetics in nature. We are introducing the storefront in alpha in order to test these items and their value. No selections in the store or their indicated cost, during testing there's no real cost in any case, is final. Our purpose is quality assurance and gathering player feedback. So please share your thoughts on the system is introduced, once the system is introduced, sorry. The testing audience will see each type of item we are considering and have an opportunity to provide feedback before they are introduced to the live game. Looking towards the future, we will also test ideas on how to offer players quality of life items for mechanics like rested XP and fast travel, both obtainable in-game and purchasable in the store. The timing of release for these types of items will depend on how players progress in the months after launch. The more players who are able to experience all of our exciting endgame content and game modes, the healthier the overall experience will be for all players. Our goal with all items of any type is that they not offer an advantage that imbalance the game. We understand that this line is based on player interpretation, so we ask for your patience while we test in alpha and listen to your feedback. For transparency on future plans, we are also contemplating, but have not finalized, a Battle Pass style program that would combine store items on a periodic basis. This will also be tested ahead of time to ensure it provides strong value without distributing gameplay for those not participating. Much further along, there's also the possibility of optional expansions, which would have a separate cost. Rich Lawrence, Studio Director. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. When you read just this without knowing much about the gaming industry, you might say, okay, well, they are carefully considering all the things which are in the game and how not to impact said game. The problem is, as somebody who has now been working in the gaming industry for 10 years in multiple positions and have also been a gamer my whole life, this text is not as pretty as it sounds. Let's talk about the first part here. Our plan is not, and never will be, to create a feeling that store items are necessary to enjoy the game. So, about this particular part, are necessary. Well, truth to be told, a lot of the store items we see in a lot of online games are never necessary. But the problem is the alternative. The alternative normally means you have to farm hundreds and hundreds of hours or just buy the item in that store for a few bucks instead. And so for a lot of people, it becomes so annoying to get that item that at some point they break and say, okay, you know what, I will buy this. And that's what they are basically saying themselves. All players will be able to play the full game experience we ship without having to make a store purchase. And that is completely correct. You will be able to play all the raids. You will be able to get to that point eventually, as long as you are putting enough time into the game. And this is the problem we have nowadays. We had a good amount of games where basically the business side came in and was like, hey, can you drag this out a little bit? So instead of just 2 hours of farming for the healing potions for that raid, can you make it 6 to 8 hours? Like, don't make it too atrocious, but make it annoying enough that after some time, people will buy something. And that's what a lot of games did. And like, let me give you an example here. Diablo 3 had a real money auction house before the expansion, and Blizzard always said, no, it's not necessary, you can just farm the stuff. But it was all so random and so atrocious to get the items that a lot of people did go to the auction house. And we saw that when, with the expansions Reapers of Souls, Blizzard had to completely redesign the item experience, the drop experience, like, because they took out the auction house, they took out the item shop, so to speak, and they had to completely rebalance and rechange how loot worked in the game. You just realized how bad they actually played with the gameplay mechanics in the background when you saw the patch notes for that expansion. And we see that sometimes even with Ubisoft games, right? Where they're always saying like, yeah, you know, the things we are selling in the item shop, like, they're not necessary, but you will probably have to farm for hours and hours and hours. And it's like, oh God. So when developers are telling me, technically it's not necessary, yeah, it's not necessary, but it's a huge problem. And just don't, like, respect my time. Like, nowadays the biggest problem is that a lot of developers and publishers do not respect my time, and the only way how they respect your time is by making you pay more. And I find that very questionable. All store items at launch will be exclusively cosmetic in nature. And you might say, hey, that's good, right? It's just cosmetics at launch. So that means in 6 months, they make no promises of what they will put in that item store. And if you want a perfect example for this, look at Black Desert Online. They said the same thing. Hey folks, at launch. Like, you don't have to fear anything. As you can see, our item shop is purely cosmetic. Okay, that the cosmetic items are actually giving you some buffs. That was a completely different topic. But they were like, yeah, but it's just cosmetic, it's not that important. And then just a few months in, and multiple years now in, you can basically buy tons of things which are so-called quality of life items, right? Because you have to farm so much that people are just breaking down and buy it directly. So yeah, and they say it themselves, looking towards the future, we will also test ideas on how to offer players quality of life items. Okay, quick question here. Since when are we not patching quality of life things into a game anymore? Since when do we have to pay extra for quality of life? What is this? This is the worst. Don't do this. Let me give you an example of a game I love and adore. I have thousands of hours in that game, and that's Final Fantasy XIV Online. I love that game to death. I'm looking forward to the new expansion. But I was always a critic of how they did the leveling experience. If you don't know, you can buy fast leveling for your character, and you can also skip the main story of the game. You shouldn't do that, because that thing is just amazing and gets just wow. But that's not the point here. And one of the biggest problems they had was the base game. So when you reached max level in the base game, before you could go into the next expansion, you had to do another 100 quests. And they were not optional, you had to do them. 100 additional quests after you reach the max level of the base game before you can move on to the expansion. And those quests were boring as heck and mostly atrocious. And the answer was, well, buy our leveling pack. You can just skip that if you give us some money. And I was always like, what? No! That is not what you should offer. And thankfully, a few months ago, they finally took some time and cut down the amount of quests you had to do. Like, they were making them more compact, and now it's only like a few quests you have to do. Like, it took them years though, and they probably made a good portion of that money. And again, as much as I love that game, that is the only point where I had to say, no, you did this. I understand why the 100 quests were there when it happened, because they didn't really plan that much ahead for the expansions and whatnot. So it made sense at the point when they put those quests in, but they could have just patched them, right? They could have just taken them out. And instead of doing that, they were deciding not to, and they were deciding to offer a paid option. And that's a no-go. So the same thing goes here for New World. Do not offer me a paid solution for the things you basically screwed up. Like, go there, fix those things after a few months, and make it just easier for the people to come after, right? When there is a person who starts in like 6 months or in a year, where is the problem to lower the time those people need to level? But no, you see business opportunity here, and you want to get more money from the people. And that's the problem I have here as well. And they say our goal with all the items of any type is that they not offer an advantage that imbalances the game. Here's the thing. I said it before. You don't need that anymore. Nowadays, a lot of online games do not offer that anymore. Like, we all still remember the free-to-play MMOs like 15 years ago, which literally gave you advantages in the game, and if you wouldn't buy those things from the item shop, you couldn't compete. right? Especially games coming from the Asian market did that pretty obviously. And that completely changed over the decade. Over the decade, they just learned there are much better ways to sell you items which are still getting you to the point that you are buying into them, but not really interfering with the gameplay itself. And as I said, the time factor is nowadays a huge thing. Because if you have to make a decision, if you now want just to sit down after work and farm for 8 hours just to get a little bit of resources out of it, or if you could just go to the shop and buy it for $10 there, all the stuff you need, a lot of people will do that. And I find that a little bit scummy, to say the least. Like, they basically put things in the game to make it all slower, so they know what they are doing. And yeah, this is of course a big problem for me. Like, I'm still looking forward to New World. I still want to see what they have to offer, but I will be honest, if you are starting out with this text where you're trying to ship around the actual issues and basically make them sound like yeah, they will not happen at release, but what happens in 6 months? Especially when you have already invested hundreds of hours into the game, then we know that you might probably not leave, even if we introduce a very questionable microtransactions. That's, by the way, what Black Desert Online did. Like, a lot of people, when they started to implement the things they now have, is like a lot of people have already spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours in that game. So the chance for those people who are already that invested into a game to leave is relatively low. And they introduced those things and people were really unhappy, but they were not leaving the game. So, yeah. Like, again, this is not just a New World issue. I see this with a lot of games nowadays, like even single player games like Assassin's Creed, right, where we are just getting tons of items which are not necessarily gameplay important. Like, you can still get them all in the game, but investment of time is such an important thing nowadays that you really have to ask yourself, do I want to do something really fun, or do I want to literally work in a video game to get what I want? I mean, this is what we are moving to nowadays, right? That video games, you actually play to have fun and leave your real life a little bit behind, like calm down from work or whatever, is now transforming more and more into this work part where they're telling you, yeah, if you want something from us, even after you paid for that product, you better work or you pay more money for us. And that's a dangerous development. And again, I hope that New World learns from this and that the things we are getting will not be atrocious and that everything I just said will be void when the game comes out. And I will eat my own words. I hope so. I hate to be right about those things. I really do. But unfortunately, I've been too long in this industry to be really surprised at the things which are happening, and I've seen them too often, that my trust on those kind of things are pretty low. Because as I said, yes, a developer might not want this. But unfortunately, it's not the choice of the developer. It's the choice of the business side. And when your CEO or whoever from the business side, who is your boss, is coming in and is telling you, you will implement this into the game so we make more money, then you have two options. You say yes and you do it, or you lose your job. That's where we are at. So most people would just say, well, this sucks, but I love my job, I love the money I make. Yeah, let's implement that. It's mostly not their choice, and it sucks pretty much. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you leave a like. If you're also new to the channel, you want to see more gaming news, reaction videos, gameplay, tips and tricks, like everything you basically need for gaming, you will find that here in the channel, and you might want to subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that. If you also want to watch me stream video games live and talk about gaming news, make sure you're checking me out on trovo.live, not Twitch. I'm not streaming on Twitch. Don't do it. Even though I'm a Twitch partner, I'm not streaming there. But I'm on trovo.live/chaosmole, and I stream from Monday to Friday, starting at 9 AM ET, which is East Coast time, which is 2 PM GMT, and 3 PM Central European time. With that said, thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Stay safe.